Basically, what you have is the Biden administration has been using this COVID-era order to return some migrants back to Mexico,
Right.
and that's going to end. And so the question is, what happens next? And no one really knows for sure, but what appears is going to happen is that Biden is going to be taking most of the migrants that come in.
Welcome to the Debrief, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by commentary editor Conn Carroll. Conn, the border's been really a perpetual problem throughout the Biden administration, but there's new concern given Title 42 being about to go away. White House is trying to sound like it's getting tough on this situation. What's really going on?
Well, what's really going on is that we've had a crisis since Biden took office because he started a catch and release policy that's sent illegal immigration through the roof. And this flood of migrants at the southern border is about to become a tsunami next week, next Friday. Basically, what you have is the Biden administration has been using this COVID-era order to return some migrants back to Mexico,
Right.
and that's going to end. And so the question is, what happens next? And no one really knows for sure, but what appears is going to happen is that Biden is going to be taking most of the migrants that come in. These are people, most of these people are not sneaking across the border. They are going to Border Patrol people, turning themselves in, saying, I'm afraid to go back to my home country, and I want to apply for asylum protection here in the United States. They are then taken in by Border Patrol, transferred to HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, who can only hold them for 3 days, and then they are released, paroled into the country where they can go wherever they want.
So the Biden administration is trying to position itself as such that they've got a handle on this situation. They've cited various statistics about reductions in illegal immigration that don't really jive with most people's definition of how you would measure those things. They've dispatched some troops to the area. Is anything they're doing more than cosmetic?
Not really, not really. So the White House Press Secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, this past week claimed, when pressed specifically about immigration in general, what is Biden going to be do when Title 42 ends? And she said that the Biden administration policies have reduced immigration by 90%, which is a complete and total lie. The next day she came back and tried to clean it up, saying, oh, what I meant to say was that for a very specific group of Venezuelans in the month between December 2022 and January 23, for that one population, it fell 90% because of this new program Biden implemented, this new parole program. But setting aside for a second, you're just talking about this one narrow population for 1 month. That program included the stick of Title 42 and the carrot of letting 30,000 people in.
Right.
So what that policy did was say, okay, look, Mexico, we will agree to take in 30,000 Venezuelans a month, but you then have to allow us to send all the rest of them through Title 42 back to you. Well, that stick is going to be ending. So even in that one narrow policy where for one narrow group of people, illegal immigration went down for 1 month, the only reason it was successful was because of Title 42, which is not going to exist next Friday.
So another White House line of attack to say that they really are the true defenders of the border is to paint the House Republicans' debt ceiling proposal as defunding border security, defunding the Border Patrol.
Which, of course, it does not do in any way. So there is a generic instruction to the Budget Committee to come up with a 20% reduction in spending over the next year on discretionary items. So generically, Border Patrol spending could be within that, right? And so could anything else, but it doesn't in any way actually cut the Border Patrol aids. But again, the Biden administration this past week announced that they're going to be sending 1,500 troops to the border.
Right.
There's already 2,500 National Guardsmen already down there. This is not a manpower problem. You could send 1 million troops to the border. But if the policy is to take migrants when they cross the border and claim they're afraid to go back home and then release them into the country, more are going to come. It's not a manpower issue. Once you get the policy right, migrants will stop coming.
So the Supreme Court granted cert in an important case for administrative law. Explain a little bit about what's going on.
Sure. So the case is called Loper Bright versus Raimondo. Loper Bright is a fishing family in New Jersey. There's 4 other fishing families all in New Jersey, and they're suing the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary Raimondo, about a regulation that's actually through the National Maritime Fishing Agency. And so the Congress passed an act back in, I think, the 1960s, 1970s that managed fisheries. And the act specifically says, the statute Congress passed says, that the fishery agency is allowed to place federal monitors on fishing boats. So these fishermen have to take the monitors out to observe them when they're fishing to make sure they're not catching too much, they're not catching the right fish, etc. But what the statute never does say is that that the agency has the power to force the fishermen to pay for those monitors. So in other fisheries, the Congress actually does say, yes, the agency has the power to force industry to pay, but not for these fisheries. And so what the government did anyways is say, okay, we're going to, in 2020, they issued a new regulation, so we're going to start forcing fishermen to pay for these monitors, even though the statute never gave us the power to do so. And so these fishermen saying, hey look, this is not in the statute. And so there it all comes down to what is called the Chevron deference. There was a case back in the 80s, Chevron versus the United States, and under that law, it was determined that if there is a ambiguity in a statute, a regulatory statute to an agency, the agency gets deference in how they interpret the statute. But what these fishermen are arguing is, look, yes, it's ambiguous as to whether or not this grant of power was in the statute, but it never explicitly gave them the power to impose this cost on us. Therefore, you should overturn at least this narrow definition of what Chevron does.
Sounds like a fine kettle of fish.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Conn. You can read Conn and the rest of our commentary team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.